Okay, it is 5 o'clock. We will go ahead and begin this meeting of the Kokomo City Board of Zoning Appeals. I would ask if you have a cell phone to make sure you put that on silent or off, and then invite you to join us as we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, our first item on the agenda this evening is the approval of the minutes from the August 7th, 2018 meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes as printed.
Second. Moved and seconded to approve the August 7th, 2018 minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. All right, our first case is case 13V18. Mr. Sheehan?
Yes, the petition of Rodney Winkin for Menards requested a variance to allow a fence height of 8 feet to section 6.17BA on the north, west, and south elevations in a C2 zone for property described as Menards Minor Subdivision, Lot 1, containing 13.15 acres, City of Kokomo Center Township, Howard County, Indiana, at 1715 East Haven Street.
Do you have a motion on this case?
I move that we approve case number 13B18 and adopt the findings of the petitioner as those of the board and make those findings part of the record and any additional comments.
Thank you.
Seconded.
All right, thank you. All right, whoever's addressing case 13V18, if you'd step to the microphone, if you'd state your name and your address for the record, and then just kind of tell us what it is that brings you here this evening, what you want to do.
Josh Melder, 5101 Menard Drive, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, area code 54703. Our findings of fact. 1, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you just 1 sec. Just imagine, I have no clue what it is
Sure.
that you're asking for, so maybe if I do
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
But I need to hear it from you.
We're requesting a variance to the fence height ordinance. We have a 14-foot fence that surrounds our lumberyard area, and the current zoning allows for 6 feet, and so we would need a variance of 8 feet to allow for that lumberyard fence.
That's what I was looking for, thank you.
Yep.
Now you can go into the...
Sure.
Council keeps me honest, too. Has there been any ex parte communication from board members regarding this case? I'm terrible at that. Okay. Thank you. Welcome back. Now, your turn. I'll write that right here.
Petitioner's findings of fact. 1, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Menard Inc. is of the opinion that the granted variance will not have any injurious effect on the community. The fence is already existing, and we are proposing to operate the property in the exact same manner that is existing today. 2, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. The proposed variance will not affect the value of the property. The Menard property will operate just as it does today. Menard Inc. is of the opinion that a 14-foot high fence is a benefit to adjacent landowners because it shields their view of our guest traffic, team member traffic, and materials that are stored in the lumber yard. 3, the strict application of the terms of this zoning ordinance will result in the practical difficulty. This situation shall not be self-imposed nor be based on a perceived reduction of or restriction of economic gain. If the variance is not approved, Menard Inc. will need to remove all existing fencing and pallet racking. This would require issues from a merchandising and operational perspective.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sheeline, the staff findings?
Sure. Staff findings for case 13V18, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. The petitioner plans to place a fence within property lines, but also within a utility easement. They have reached an agreement with Indiana American Water in order to relocate the water vault contained within the easement, replacing the existing fence to the rear yard and southern side yard, and adding new fencing along the northern side yard should not negatively impact the safety of the surrounding community. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Granting this variance will shield the surrounding properties from seeing the outdoor storage area, but a fence within the ordinance guidelines would function in the same manner. The fence that currently stands in the rear yard and southern side yard is 14 foot tall and legally non-conforming, that faces a tree line that helps to soften the impact. Adding a 14-foot tall fence along Haven Street creates the aesthetic of a fortress, not a retail store. This is not compatible with the area. A strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in a practical difficulty. This situation shall not be self-imposed, nor be based on a perceived reduction of or restriction of economic gain. If the variance is not granted, the petitioner will be unable to replace their current 14-foot tall fence and expand it to the northern side yard. The petitioner may still store items up to the top of a 6-foot fence as allowed by the City of Kokomo zoning ordinance. As the petitioner stocks larger items, the staff recommends granting the variance to replace the existing 4-foot tall fence in the rear yard and southern side yard only, while keeping the northern side yard fence 6 foot in height. The petitioner plans to build a new storage building in addition to the fence. This will further increase their storage space in addition to a new 6-foot fence.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the board at this time?
Is this a chain link fence?
No, it is our typical wood fence that you would see currently existing at the store.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Can I clarify? I just want to make sure everybody understands. The staff did not have any problems, but there's currently a 14-foot high fence along the back and part of the southern side. We absolutely have no problem replacing any of that. The question that we have is a 14-foot high fence along Haven Street, which we feel is inappropriate, and we would prefer that they keep the new fence along Havens at the 6-foot level, which is what the ordinance provides for.
You mentioned lumber and traffic of your team members. What would be stored? What would be happening behind that Havens Street fence?
So that encloses our entirety of our lumber yard. So our expanded warehouse area will be back there. So any customers who would purchase larger lumber would be loading, unloading the lumber purchases there, along with our team members when we would be unloading our incoming arrivals.
So it's a staging area for some of the items, right?
Yes, yeah. It'll be in the new proposed warehouse expansion.
So Josh, you guys are asking for a 14-foot tall fence. The city is saying, we think a 6-foot fence is fine. We think that can stay in the ordinance, and we're willing to say, this is what the city's saying in their findings. They're saying we're willing to say, sure, we agree, 14-foot, keep it in the back and on the south side, but we think the 6-foot. Why? I mean, so in essence, they're saying we agree with 2/3 of their request. This board has to decide what do we do here. So why the need for that additional 8 feet on the north side?
Sure. We have racking along our fence that we store items in. Because the proposed expanded warehouse is going to take some of that formerly used area that was part of the fence racking, we need that additional space now to house the items that are being moved.
Additional vertical space?
Correct. Yes, yeah.
So the expansion to the warehouse, is the building going to be expanded to the west, on the west side of the building?
Yeah, yes, it is going to be located to the west behind the existing store. And so that's going to allow us to better serve the citizens of Kokomo. We'll be able to carry our standard product lines. Currently, our warehousing space is well below our typical prototype in size. And so we'd be able to carry more of our products here for the people.
I may have missed it. How long of a fence on the Haven Street side?
I don't have that down on my plans. I'd have to,
If I remember correctly, it goes quite a ways past the building, which is what we really have
Yeah.
more of the problem with. If I remember correctly, if it stopped at the building, I think that would be one thing, but I don't believe it does
Are you saying the front of the building?
from the building. It goes past the front of the building on Haven Street.
do you guys have the plans? I brought copies.
No, it's not there.
We have,
He can go in the front of the building.
and then we have this sky view as well. Yeah, that might be easier for us to pass. Okay, thank you.
So it looks like it's going to be projecting out from the building and then,
Straight down the side of the street.
yep.
Correct.
You're gonna put all pallet racks and stuff in that area?
Yes, that's going to be all behind the fencing.
Much space there.
That's what our store planning folks have asked for in terms of what they need to replace the space that is being removed due to the warehousing.
Okay. Is this the very, yeah, this is the
Is there space there, I mean, it's hard to tell here, is there space there to store things along the side of the building, like up against the wall of the building, and then also along the fence, on the north side? Oh, you know where I'm saying, along the side of, the north side of the building?
Correct. Yeah. I don't know that there would be. Part of the pallet racking system that we have allows it to be covered, and so we don't like to store a lot of stuff uncovered with wood products and everything else out in the elements. It's better if it's
Covered with the roof, you mean?
yeah, part of the racking system, the shelving essentially that is located on the wall, and so is there space there? Possibly that would restrict, movement of trucks or anything, and we're not getting semi trucks obviously in there, but anyone loading up a semi truck or a passenger vehicle.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm wondering, along that north side between where the fence is proposed on the north side on Havens and the building, that stretch there, I understand, I think I'm understanding the question is if we can put the 14-foot fence, we'll put these racks against that fence.
Correct. Yeah, they
My
are.
question is, what if they were moved to the opposite side of that strip and they were against the building? And I think, so you might have missed, I don't know if I made if my first question
Sure.
is clear, because I think the answer was, well, we want it to be undercover.
Sure.
But if it's against the fence, it won't be undercover either, probably, or maybe it would.
I understand what you're saying. So the way we view it is we like to have our entire lumber yard closed off from public view. Unlike a Lowe's or a Home Depot, we think it looks more aesthetically pleasing to communities rather than seeing a bunch of stuff just kind of lying out in a lumber yard. It's one solid fence line, and so that's why we would say that we should have the fence the entire length rather than having different heights and then people being able to see into the lumber yard.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before I ask for input from the audience? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to be heard regarding this case? All right. You fellas coming up with questions or solutions?
Trying to measure some stuff.
Okay. Nothing down that way?
I got, Greg, did you ask them if they'd move the front up and back some, and they didn't like that idea? Or?
We've asked for several variations, and it seems like that they're stuck on the 14-foot where they want it, so.
Is that a true statement? You don't want to talk about any type of an adjustment as far as the front side of the fence and then,
Again, it would just restrict the items that we currently have along the fence line in our racking. We need that entire length, according to our store planning, to replace the distance that will be taken up by the warehouse to store the items that are currently out there.
What kind of items are going to be stored along that fence if you're allowed at 14 foot high? You say it's pallet racks, but
Yep, there will be some lumber is oftentimes stored back there, different size pieces of
I know
lumber.
On the backside, on the west side, you have your racks back there where you have most of your dimensional lumber and everything else. I just wondered what you would be putting there on the north side.
Similar type items. It would be lumber and other items that we would have typically in our lumber yard.
Anyone else? Okay, so I guess a question, this is probably a question for council. If the board says, well, we have trouble with the 14-foot fence on the north side, which is the petitioner, was what the petitioner is asking, but the staff recommendation is to grant the 14-foot fence on the south and west sides, but keep 6 feet.
If I understand everything right, they already have a 14 foot on the south and west side, is that right?
Right, but,
It's not in
legally
compliance
non-conforming.
with the city ordinance, and we're allowing them that exemption to exist. Is that right?
currently, but if they replace it, then they have to either bring it in compliance or do what he's doing,
Okay.
do what he's here for tonight to get that variance. So I guess my question is what, our motion obviously is to approve so that we can discuss the case. Do we amend that if that's the way people want to go or not? I'm asking you because you guys might, we need to know.
Well, the petition is what the petition is, so we made a motion to hear it. If they want to, you can vote to accept it in part and deny it in part, if that is how you would like to proceed, or you can deny it in whole, or you can make a motion to amend it. There's a variation of how you,
Okay.
that might be up to you, since you made the motion. Did you make the motion?
Yes, I did. And my
More than
thought-
one person can make a motion, too.
Yeah, my thoughts right now is looking at the plans, the 14-foot fence coming out from the edge of the building down Haven Street, to me, does not impede anything because it's all along the side of the building anyway. All it's doing is giving them additional storage space outside is what we're giving them, and allowing them to have their variance, or the rest of their fence approved as such, as they now.
Yeah, so, and just so you guys on the board are clear, I'm not saying that's the way we're going. I just want to clarify before I call for the vote that I want to make sure what our options are, how we do this. So I will call for the vote if there are no other questions. Do you have anything else to add?
No, sir.
Okay. We do have a motion for the approval of case 13V18. It's been moved and seconded to approve that. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
no,
Did you vote?
no. Is this for the 14-foot fence for them? Then I'm an aye.
Okay.
Okay, we'll call a roll call vote. Mr. Besser?
no.
That'd be a 3-1 though.
Ms. Rink?
Yes.
Mr. Hiker?
Yes.
Mr. Myers?
Yes.
3-1. Passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next case on the agenda is case 18V18. Oh, sorry.
Make sure I get this down before I forget.
My name's Lee Wiggs.
Oh, sorry.
Hang on a
We haven't called
One
it yet.
second.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. A petition of Lee R. Wiggs requesting variance of 14 square foot to section 3.10 front yard setback in an R3 zone on property described as Vintonwood subdivision, section 4, lot 104, Harrison Township, Howard County, Indiana, at 312 Bruce Court.
Do I have a motion on this case?
Move that we approve case number 18B18 and adopt the findings of the petitioner as those of the board and make those findings part of our record.
Thank you. Have any board members had any ex parte communication regarding this case?
No.
All righty. All right, now we're ready for you to give us your name and address and tell us what's happening here.
Lee R. Wiggs, that's 312 Bruce Court. The approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community.
Mr. Wiggs, I'm going to interrupt you, sorry. Could you tell the board, just kind of
Okay,
preface it, what you're wanting to do?
What I'm wanting to do is put a carport on the front of the house, attached to the house, matching V-roof for the peak that's already on the roof, and it's protection for the second car, as well as my wife and myself coming and going in inclement weather. We used to have 2 large trees in the front yard. We lost those, so our cooling bills have been astronomical for the last few years, especially this year, with all the high temperatures and everything like that. And just kind of help protect, from some of the ice on the driveway coming and going, stuff like that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Now, if you'll go ahead and with your findings, thank you.
The approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community. Use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. The strict application of terms of this zoning ordinance will result in a practical difficulty. This situation shall not be self-imposed nor be based on a perceived reduction or restriction of economic gain.
And then, can you read your bullet point there? And do you have the bullet point there under that?
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, well, you mean, what's written underneath will help
Right.
protect my car?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So if you'll read that, so that way we have it in the
Okay.
record, yeah.
Will help protect my car and shade the front of the house.
Thank you. All right, we'll have the staff findings.
First time for me.
No, you're fine, you're fine.
Staff findings for case 18V18. Approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. The approval of this variance will not have a negative impact on the surrounding community. It will not allow the petitioner to impede on any property lines or easements, and it will not obstruct vision clearance for motorists. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. A structure to house a vehicle is compatible with the residential nature of the area, and its protrusion into the front yard setback will not decrease existing green space. Placing an attached carport on an existing driveway away from neighboring property lines should not negatively impact the surrounding properties. The strict application of the terms of this zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulty. This situation shall not be self-imposed nor be based on a perceived reduction of or restriction of economic gain. The petitioner has an existing driveway and attached garage that he will be adding the carport onto in order to maximize the sheltering parking area. If the variance is not granted, the petitioner would have to create a new drive in the rear yard and create a freestanding accessory structure, which would be a costly alteration to his current plans.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the board for Mr. Wiggs?
No, I don't.
When you mentioned that this will follow the existing roof line, how high is it going to be as close as it is to
It's an open-sided carport.
Right.
And the peak's double wide, I think 22 feet across. It'll be a lower angle than the original peak that's on the house.
Okay.
And it comes out 14 or 16 feet. 2 4x4 posts out on a piling, and that's the only thing that's visible from side to side.
So your current
Inside roof height, probably 8 foot.
okay. Your current driveway, that's essentially the footprint that
Yes.
you'll be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a double wide drive. You can park 4 cars in it easily.
Anyone else? Anyone in the audience wishing to be heard regarding this case? Okay. Hearing none, we have a motion for the approval of case 18 v. 18. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, our next case on the agenda this evening is case 19 v. 18.
Yes, petition of McCray Property Group requesting a variance of 65 square feet to section 6.52C and a second variance of 17% to section 3.30 maximum lot coverage in a C1 zone as property described as Carrie M. Miller subdivision, Lot 5 of Part Lot 3 and Schumann subdivision, part of Lot 31 in Walnut Hill, Center Township, Kokomo, Howard County, Indiana, at 926 South Union Street.
I have a motion on this case.
I move that we approve case number 19 v. 18 and adopt the findings of the petitioner as those of the board and make those findings part of our record.
Second.
Thank you. Any ex parte communication from board members regarding this case? All right, if you'll state your name and your address for the record, we'll go from there.
I'm Bill Terry with Y Engineers, 10505 North College Avenue, Indianapolis, Indiana. We are proposing a 2,200 square foot Taco Bell on the property. We did get a new address. I know it's 926, but the new address is 204 East of Markland. And we're here for 2 variances.
Okay.
The approval will not,
Well, I'm sorry, can you tell what the 2 variances are that you're, and why?
first variance is lot coverage, because the lot's only 0.6 of an acre, and it's 60%, I believe, was what the impervious was, or about 80%, a little bit underneath that. And the second one is the drive on Home Avenue, south, or north of Markland, the first one coming in.
Okay, and that, well, you'll cover that, I think, but that's too close. Your proposed one is too close to Markland, I think.
Correct.
So you need the variance there. Okay, now,
To make the lot flow and everything else, so.
okay. Now, your findings. Thanks.
The approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. This will allow easier access and traffic flow from and to the site. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property included the variance will not be affected. Construction of the Taco Bell we feel that will increase the property value surrounding the area. The strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in a practical difficulty. This situation shall be self-imposed, nor the base of perceived reduction of or restrictions of economic gain. Property in the current state is limited to what can be actually built there.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Sheeline, the staff findings?
Yeah, staff findings for case 19 v. 18. Approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Granting these variances will not negatively impact the community. The new drive is placed far enough from the intersection that will not impair traffic flow. Additional lot coverage will not impede on any property lines, recorded easements, or setbacks. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Nearby businesses have similarly placed entrance/exit points. The additional lot coverage will not negatively impact the adjoining properties, as the infilling of a current vacant lot with a new modern structure will positively impact the surrounding area. The new restaurant will be comparable in size with other nearby structures and will meet both parking and landscape standards with the added lot coverage. The strict application of the terms of this zoning ordinance will result in a practical difficulty. This situation shall not be self-imposed nor be based on a perceived reduction of or restriction of economic gain. Due to the oddly shaped lot, the petitioner has a practical difficulty in placing the building properly to accommodate a drive-through. The planned drive is placed to make drive-through access safe and efficient. The amount of space denoted as lot coverage also includes the parking areas, drive-through patio, and other impervious surfaces, and the increase will allow the petitioner to accommodate as many customers as possible. Granting these variances will allow the petitioner to use their uniquely shaped lot to its best advantage, use their current plans rather than crafting new ones, and to better serve their customers.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I just would like to say real quick, I want to commend Bill and his staff. When you look at this lot, and you all know where it is, you all know how difficult this is. I'm amazed that they only had to get 2 variances, to be quite honest with you. So they did a really nice job of putting the plan together.
Well, thank you for the town
Appreciate it.
for everything you guys done.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Well, as you were reading the staff findings, I put an exclamation mark next to will meet both parking and landscaping standards, because I think one of the most common variance requests that comes up here with a business is the parking variance. So I was like, oh, wow. So I had to put an exclamation mark. All right, anyone in the audience wishing to be heard regarding this case? No one in the audience? No questions or comments from the board? All right, we do have a motion for the approval of case 19V18. It has been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right,
Thank you.
congratulations. Thank you. Our next case to be heard this evening is case 20V18.
Yes, petition of Patrick Clifford for Second Missionary Baptist Church requesting a variance of 9.5 square feet to section 6.40G in an IS zone on property described as Jail Heaton Second Edition, Lot 42, Motson Grethers Edition, Lot 119, a vacated alley, Center Township, Kokomo, Howard County, Indiana, 818 North Apperson Way.
I have a motion on case 20V18.
I move that we approve case number 20V18 and adopt the findings of petitioners as those of the board and make those findings part of the record.
Seconded.
All right, thank you. Any board members had any ex parte communication regarding case 20V18? Okay. Mr. Clifford, if you'll state your name and address for the record and tell us what it is that brings you here, and then go into your findings of fact.
All right. My name is Patrick Clifford. My address is 1115 East Markland Avenue, and I have a sign shop. They're Clifford Signs, and I'm representing Second Missionary Church. And what they're asking for is a sign that they need to replace. They've had a sign there for about 25 years, and they got it pretty close to the sidewalk. So actually getting a ground sign, I have to go an additional 10 more feet back into the parking lot. And what they're asking is they really don't want to go back into the parking lot because all that parking spot is pretty much for handicap. So what they're asking me is to basically put the sign there where it's been for the period of time right now. And they got the sign that they have now 7.5 foot tall. So I went down to 6 foot to make it in compliance with the within the sign ordinance. The only thing that I'm asking for is see if it's okay to just put the sign where it was in the same place instead of 7.5 foot tall, 6 foot tall. So we're just putting a whole new ground sign in for them.
So width is the same as it is currently?
Yeah,
Just bringing it down a little bit?
yeah. And that sign's been there like 25 years. And it's pretty far away from the corner. And the thing that really kind of since they've improved the Apperson Way quite a way, they more or less added, actually they turned it in from 4-lane road to 2-lane. They actually took 10 feet of Apperson. And that pretty much, in my mind, even though the property line is still right there by the sidewalk, it is 10 feet farther away from a line of traffic anyway. So it's still pretty much in the safe zone. That's what I'm asking for.
Thank you. All right, if you want to go ahead and read your findings.
Okay. The approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. The new sign will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community. The improvement to the road has provided better visibility and line of sight with Apperson Way. The sign will be 71 feet north of East Madison Street, and the sign will be setting at the same location for over 25 years. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property includes invariance will not be affected in substantial adverse manner. The new sign will not affect the value of the adjacent property. We reduced the overall height of the sign to 6 foot tall, and the current sign is 7.5 foot tall. Number 3, the strict application of terms of the zoning ordinance will result in physical difficulty. This situation shall not be self-imposed, nor be based on perceived reduction or restricted to economic gain. The new sign will not be self-imposed, nor be based on perceived reduction of or restriction of economic gain.
Okay, thank you. Staff findings?
Staff findings for case 20 V18, approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Granting this variance will not be detrimental to the surrounding community as the sign has stood in this space for 25 years. The variance is necessary due to the current sign's legal non-conforming status. The new sign will not encroach on any recorded easements and will not be in the right-of-way. Because of the expansion of sidewalks and narrowing of the roads in the area, there are no issues with vision clearance. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Granting this variance will not be disruptive to the surrounding community as the sign has occupied the same space for the past 25 years. 5 of the 6 surrounding properties are owned by the church. Only the property to the rear is owned by another party. Adding a new updated sign will be aesthetically pleasing change for the area that will not negatively impact property values. The strict application of the terms of this zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulty. This situation shall not be self-imposed nor be based on a perceived reduction of or restriction of economic gain. If the petitioners are not granted the variance, they will either be unable to put in a new sign to replace their outdated sign, or they will have to relocate the sign into their parking lot, losing the space that is reserved for elderly or handicapped parishioners. The proximity of the existing parking lot to the street creates a practical difficulty for the petitioner, and a new sign would be a vast improvement. Thus, the staff supports granting this variance.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
The church owns that green space to the north of the chapel, right?
The green space north of the chapel,
Right. There's a side yard there.
it's south of the chapel. It's on the.
Parking lot is south of the chapel.
Right, the parking lot
The
south.
church owns a green space to the north of that chapel that's, I don't know, 100 feet wide or so.
In
Sure,
between
I'm not so
Earl's
sure what-
Barber Shop and the church, is that what you're asking?
Yes. Was there any discussion about placing the sign there so it could be backed off the road a little bit?
I didn't see that on the property. I really didn't see that.
We have actually went out and checked. There's absolutely no issues with that sign being replaced where it is, just so you know. We've been out and checked Vision Clearance Triangle. There's no issues there at all. The only thing I would ask is, and we certainly can't force it, I would ask if you're going to put the new sign up, if you could put a little bit of landscaping around it to dress it up, that would be wonderful. I can't force that on you, but it'd sure be nice if you would do that for us. But, yeah, we have no issues with the sign where they go. And like I said, it's been there for 25 years. We've never had any complaints about any motorists not being able to see or.
If I understand everything right, they're actually reducing the size
They
of
are.
the sign down.
Yes,
This
so
is-
they're actually coming in and they're putting a ground sign in, which is, as you folks know, is what we're suggesting for the whole city. So they are coming down to a ground sign, bringing it down to the 6-foot line.
This is one of those interesting cases where sometimes someone will say, well, I'm making a smaller garage where my bigger one was, or restaurants, oh, my sign's this tall, I'm bringing it down to here, but I need a variance to bring it down. That's, it's usually pretty good situation to be in. Are there any other questions or concerns from the board? Mr. Clifford, anything you'd like to add?
No, not now.
Anyone in the audience wishing to be heard regarding this case? All right, we have a motion for the approval of case 20V18. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. You're welcome. All right, our next item on the agenda is case 1A17.
Yes, the appeal hearing on Burkhardt Advertising notice of violation letter.
I'm going to turn this over to counsel, and she can give us guidance on our procedure here.
I move that we hear and take evidence on case 1AA17, take the matter under advisement pending an executive session and adoption of findings of fact. I do need a second.
Seconded.
Okay. All right, so whoever is addressing case 1AA17, if you'd step to the microphone, please. Oh, and while you're doing that, while you're coming forward, has there been any ex parte communication regarding this case? All right.
Good evening. I have placed in front of you guys all have binders with our exhibits of evidence in there. If you don't mind, I'll start, and then Representative from Burkhart. My name's Matt Deputy. I'm an attorney in South Bend, Indiana. I represent Burkhart Advertising.
Matt, your last name?
Deputy, just like a sheriff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you guys for your time tonight. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. There's 3 violations, 4 signs, so it's a bit complicated, and hopefully we don't run into the weeds here. Burkhart Advertising is a 3rd-generation family-owned business in South Bend, Indiana, and it has over 80 structures in the city of Kokomo and Howard County, with significant investment when they pay tax dollars to the county, and as well as pay landowners for the space. And the notices that we'll be discussing today are part of a larger story that I think Dave will mention and discuss briefly. However, before I begin, I'd like to just note a couple of objections. First, the packet that we received from the planning department included a bunch of several violations that were not noticed in the notice of violations, and so we just want to object that that wasn't proper form. It should have been in the actual notice of violation. Second, I spoke with the city's council and asked if we could question Mr. Sheeline on some of the staff's findings, and he said that that would not be appropriate. So we were just objecting that we're not able to present all of our evidence into the record. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dave to give you a brief statement.
Can I ask a clarification?
Yes.
Because I'm sorry, I'm just stepping back into
No.
12 weeks have gone. You are not allowed to question. Did you mean you're not allowed to cross-examine today? Or call as a witness? Or
I was going to, I would like to just kind of go through how they came up with their findings and ask a few questions regarding the findings and what happened. And I understand if you guys don't want to do that, but.
I just wasn't sure if you meant you weren't allowed to question in the last 6 months this has been pending, or you weren't allowed to
sure,
today.
yeah. I was talking about today. Today is when we put the evidence into the record, and so that was why I was asking for the question. So that's our.
Good evening. I'm Dave Herman with Burkhart Advertising. I have worked for Burkhart over the past 11 years. During the last 5 years, it has become evident that the city of Kokomo is openly hostile towards my company's business and the livelihoods of all of our employees in the outdoor advertising industry in the city. The story of these alleged violations that are before you today begins in 2013. In November of 2013, a tornado came through Kokomo and damaged 11 of Burkhart Advertising structures. Rather than simply allowing Burkhart to repair the damage from this natural disaster, Mr. Sheeline issued notice of violation letters for each of those structures and blocked Burkhart from repairing them. Eventually, Burkhart and the city came to an agreement which allowed some structures to be repaired, and Burkhart agreed to remove others. The city had reviewed Burkhart's signs in Kokomo and provided Burkhart with a list of signs which they claimed were in violation. As part of the settlement, Burkhart and the city of Kokomo entered into a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, which specifically protected the signs that the city believed to be in violation and any of Burkhart's remaining sign inventory from these types of violations going forward. We have provided you each with a copy of the agreement which was executed by Mr. Sheeline on July 14th, 2014, along with the list sent by the city attorneys as Exhibit 1. The last line of the document states Kokomo will not cite any Burkhart billboards for non-compliance as long as both parties are working in good faith effort to pursue legislation. The legislation the MOU talks about was a cap and replace. Under the MOU, the city and Burkhart were supposed to work together to come up with a cap and replace ordinance that could be proposed to City Council. The beauty of cap and replace ordinance is that it allows Burkhart to get credits for removing its signs voluntarily without the city needing to pay to condemn them through eminent domain. In cities that have enacted this type of ordinance, Burkhart has significantly decreased its overall inventory and improved the remaining signs, such as they are more aesthetically pleasing to the municipality. In other words, Cap and Replace incentivizes the city and Burkhart to work together to reduce the number of signs in the community. If Cap and Replace would have been implemented here, as the city agreed to do, it's highly unlikely that Burkhart would have removed the signs in question voluntarily. Burkhart and the city worked for over a year on drafting a Cap and Replace ordinance for Kokomo and Howard County and nearly came to an agreement on the contents of the proposed legislation, but in fall of 2015, the city put the ordinance on the back burner. I believe this is around the time that the former city attorney changed jobs, which might have been part of the reason it was pushed down the priority list. However, at no time was Burkhart told that the city no longer wished to pursue Cap and Replace legislation, as the city had agreed to do in the MOU. Still working in good faith on the legislation, I followed up with the status of the draft ordinance with the city in February of 2016. Deputy Mayor Randy McKay, told us that he had not been able to locate the agreement on the Cap and Replace. I was going to ask Planning Director Sheline if he had a copy of it. When Burkhart followed up again in January of 2017, Burkhart was told that the Cap and Replace ordinance was not something that the city had given a priority to, and the city had several other irons in the fire for this spring and summer. Exhibit 2 in your binders contains various emails regarding Cap and Replace between Burkhart and the city. In that same month, the city approached Burkhart about removing 408 Washington to accommodate a developer at the 408 Washington property. I once again inquired of the status of the legislation. My inquiry was ignored. Next, Burkhart was called in to speak with Deputy Mayor Tharp on February 8th, 2017. At this meeting, Deputy Mayor Tharp threatened to go after the signs if we did not remove 408 Washington. On February 10th, 2017, after Burkhart refused to voluntarily remove the sign at 408 Washington, the city notified Burkhart that the signs in question today were not in compliance, following through with the deputy mayor's threat. In this February 10th letter, the city offered to allow the signs at 400 East Smith Road, 3005 North Apperson Way, and 1619 Rank Parkway to stay if, once again, Burkhart voluntarily removed the 408 Washington. Burkhart was given until February 17th, 2017 to accept the offer. Burkhart disagreed with the planning director's findings and because of the MOU. I believe that the city could not issue the notice of violations until after the parties had finished working on the Cap and Replace legislation. Despite Burkhart providing evidence that the signs were not in violation of zoning code, the city nevertheless issued the notices of violation letters on April 12, 2017, in direct violation of the MOU. On May 5, 2017, Mr. Sheline then informed Burkhart that the city would be fining Burkhart $2,000 per day per sign until Burkhart removed the signs. In an attempt to toll these fines, Burkhart filed its appeal with this board. Burkhart feels that the city has unjustly singled out Burkhart and that the fines were imposed are grossly disproportionate to the proposed violations. The city is also breaching the MOU by reputing its agreement not to cite any of Burkhart's billboards for noncompliance until the city and Burkhart had completed Cap and Replace legislation, and the city had recommended the legislation be passed by the city council. Burkhart would sincerely like to finish working with the city to develop Cap and Replace rather than fighting these unnecessary and wrong violations. Regarding the actual violations, Burkhart submits the following evidence which demonstrates that Burkhart's signs comply with or are properly grandfathered into the city's zoning ordinance. 408 Washington. City claims that the sign is nearly 2 feet higher than the city authorized 48.9 feet rather than the 47 feet. The permit was issued in 1988. Up until at least 1997, the ordinance allowed billboards up to 80 feet. On 8/4/2017, Burkhart hired a survey, measured the sign, and it was measured at 46.31 feet at the base. We have submitted a true and correct copy of the survey as Exhibit 3 in the packets we provided each of you. Therefore, Burkhart's sign is not in violation. 400 Smith Road, 3005 North Apperson Way. The city's notice of violation claims that there are only 234 feet apart, but the ordinance requires them to be 1,000 feet apart. The city also claims that the signs application provided a fake address, which is a material misrepresentation of the application. Finally, the city claims that because the sign was issued a permit earlier, that these two and is within 1,000 feet, both signs must go. Permits were issued on 8/31/2001. Burkhart did not apply for the permit. They bought the signs from Billboard Advertising, so it did not make the actual representations. The permit at the time required the signs to be not less than 1,000 feet from another advertising structure on both sides of the road, street, or highway. As measured along the right-of-way, the ordinance stated that an off-premise sign must have a minimum separation between off-premise signs on both sides of the street or highway shall be 1,000 feet. The permit for Smith Road was submitted to the City of Kokomo at the same time the permit for 3005 Apperson was submitted to Howard County, as it had not been annexed at this time. A copy of the relevant statute from the city and the county, as well as the permits for the signs, are included in your packet in Exhibit 4. None of the signs are thus within 1,000 feet of a sign on either side of the same street. The sign at 400 East Smith Street faces east and westbound traffic on Smith Road. There are no other signs within 1,000 feet on the north side or the south of Smith Road. The building on the property has a mailing address and driveway on Apperson Way, hence the possible confusion. 3005 North Apperson Way faces north and southbound traffic on Apperson Way. There are no other signs within 1,000 feet on the east or west of Apperson Way. The sign that the city claims has a superior right to remain is located north on Washington Street, and it faces north and southbound traffic on North Washington Street. The city has failed to provide proof of the earlier permit for the pre-existing billboard. Regardless, the pre-existing sign status is immaterial, as it reads to a different road. You can see the photos in the survey indicating how the signs read from as one travels down the roads in Exhibits 5 and 6, respectively. 1619 Rank Parkway. Similar to the signs on Smith Road and Apperson Way, Burkhart purchased this billboard and did not apply for the original permit issued in 1999. The permit was for 612 square feet of signage per side. The ordinance allowed up to 700 square feet. Sometime in 2001, the Bowers leased the sign to Billboard Advertising LLC. By this time, the sign was a double-stacked 11 by 27 structure. Subsequently, Burkhart purchased this sign structure from Billboard Advertising. Thus, it is legally non-conforming sign and is governed by the laws in effect at the time, which stated there shall be a minimum separation between off-premise signs on the same side of the highway shall be 500 feet. In October of 2000, Billboard Advertising LLC obtained a permit for a sign at 1500 block of North Street. The city claims that the sign is within 500 feet of the Burkhart sign. However, Burkhart's sign, by the city's own admission, has been in place since 1999, thus it has a superior right. There are no other signs within 500 feet of Burkhart's sign on the same side of the highway. In 2008, in a show of good faith, Burkhart paid the city for another permit with the understanding that the permit was being issued based off of Burkhart's grandfather status at the time. Since Burkhart was spending less than 50% of the sign's value in making the repairs, had the city not recognized that it still had its legal non-conforming status, it would not have issued a replacement permit in 2008. Further, Burkhart worked to reduce the overall size of the structure so that it would be more aesthetically pleasing to the city and less intensive. Specifically, Burkhart agreed to move some of the catwalks, eliminate lighting, lower the height by nearly 13 feet, and remove the ladder for safety reasons. The city is now claiming that these requested changes eliminated the sign's grandfathered status. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Herman.
Thanks, Ed. Before we get into the actual violations, I would like to address the memorandum of understanding that David mentioned, as well as the code sections that Burkhart's purported violations fall under. If you take a look at the packet we provide you, you'll see Exhibit 1 contains the MOU between the city and Burkhart. Upon review, you'll see that it's clear that Kokomo agreed to work in good faith towards the implementation of cap and replace legislation in the city of Kokomo. We met with the city last year, and they told us they would get back to us on their position of the MOU. To date, they have not. The city attorney, Ms. Copeland, I'm glad to see you back, however, has informed us as of May of this year that they're not looking to pursue the cap and replace at this time. The city has thus gone back on its word and is specifically targeting Burkhart signs. Burkhart has followed through with their end of the bargain that they entered into in 2014 in removing the 6 signs at that time. Exhibit 2 contains a few emails surrounding the cap and replace, but the bottom line is that the planning director has agreed not to do what he's precisely done today. Next, we really shouldn't even be in front of the BZA discussing this. The violations that we received are 10.7A and 10.7B. Section 10.7 is titled Types of Zoning Violations, and it says, quote, "The following shall be deemed civil zoning violations enforceable by the planning director and planning commission." 10.7A and 10.7B are thus civil zoning violations, and it's absolutely clear that they are. The code goes on to state that it is the planning director, upon verification of civil zoning violation, will issue a civil zoning violation to the responsible parties who commit the civil zoning violation. Again, there's no ambiguity here. If there's a civil zoning violation, it's supposed to be a civil zoning violation penalty. And the reason for this is because it goes to the circuit court to be adjudicated in the trial for all the various reasons of the complexities that we're dealing with right now. Also, the fines are capped much lower than $2,000 a day as we're suffering. Additionally, speaking of the fines, $2,000 per day per notice, or $6,000 per day for 4 signs, is grossly disproportionate to the purported violations. These signs have been in place for nearly 30 years in some cases without any change. Revisiting permits that were issued 2 decades ago seems abuse of discretion by the planning department. Finally, it must be noted that the issuance of these disproportionate fines coincide with my client refusing to voluntarily take down 408 Washington. As we have mentioned, 408 Washington is clearly within the zoning code. It is clear within our permits. It is 46.31 feet. I do not know how the planning commissioner measured the sign, but our surveyor shows that it is within the rights and is not in violation. For Apperson Way and the Smith Road, these signs are, again, going back to 2001, and the Howard County zoning permit that was given to the one sign is slightly different in that it was more, it allowed within 500 feet, I believe. The other one was within 1,000 feet. But it doesn't matter. They're reading to different roads. And the purpose of the sign ordinance at the time is clear by its face to be dealing with whether or not you're seeing a sign next to another sign on the same side of the road or on either side of the road. It wasn't talking about a radial from this sign can't be within another sign, it's anywhere close to that. It's clear in other portions of your code that, for example, being within the zone of school is strictly, it can't be within 700 feet or 1,000 feet of a school. This is not the case. It says on both sides of the road. It's clearly contemplating, it's dealing with the traffic flow and not something in a radial. As far as Rank Parkway goes, this sign's a legally non-conforming site. Dave, I think, maybe failed to mention in his statement that there was damage to the sign. The structure was, the faces were damaged, and so Burkhardt, out of safety, took down the faces. The faces are worth a fraction of the actual cost. Most of the cost of a sign is in the base and in the pylon that holds it up. So it's far less than 50% of the value. And so, working with the planning department, Burkhardt agreed to make it a less intensive sign at the time. They removed one of the catwalks, took off some of the lights, crammed it down, I think maybe 10 feet, and now that's what's standing there today. At the time, had it been in violation of the zoning code, the permit would not have been given. They had to go through a lot of hoops to get it to happen. So why is the planning department now coming back and looking at this and saying that because the sign that is north of there is within 500 feet, it's not within the zoning violation, or within the zoning code? Further, there's a claim that it's within 20 feet of the right-of-way. We're not denying that. Our position is that in 1999, the zoning code allowed it to be within 15 feet of the right-of-way. Again, this structure hasn't changed in 20 years almost. So the bottom line here is the signs are all in compliance with the zoning laws, and they were in place when they were originally built. The city is going after these signs to leverage Burkhardt to remove one for a private developer. They're doing so in direct violation of the MOU. And if cap and replace were simply enacted, these signs would have likely come down. So with that, I would like to read in Burkhardt's proposed findings of fact. One, Burkhardt and the city of Kokomo planning director entered into a memorandum of understanding which stayed all purported zoning violations of its signs until cap and replace ordinance was recommended to the city council.
Matt, I'm going to interrupt one sec. Is that, can you tell me where that is? In the
Last page, all the way at the back.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. You want me to start again?
You're fine.
Okay.
Thank
Memorandum of understanding which stayed all purported zoning violations of signs until the cap and replace ordinance was recommended to the council. Having not yet made said recommendation, the planning director cannot issue the notice of violation letters. Second, the notice of violations for the signs in question are civil zoning violations, and the planning director must forward the notices to the circuit court or superior court, Howard County, for final adjudication. 408 Washington is not in violation of its permit as it only measures 46.31 feet from the grade at the time the notice of violation was sent. 400 East Smith Road and 305 North Apperson Way signs read to different roads, and there is not another sign along Smith Road within 1,000 feet of 400 East Smith Road sign. Therefore, the sign is not in violation of the zoning ordinance. Finally, 1615 Park, sorry, I guess there's a typo here. The Rank Parkway sign is not within 500 feet of another sign other than the one that was built prior to or after Burkhardt's sign was in place. So it is also not within the zoning, or not in violation. The setback is also within 15 feet, which was at the time of the ordinance acceptable.
You have, I think, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think.
Yeah, no, I noticed the last one is incorrect. Is that what you're?
Okay.
Yeah, for some reason it was double printed here, so I apologize. So I don't have one for 1600. I can amend the record if you would like.
Well, so the one that's printed here, the last one we have?
Yes, no, we're missing the 1619 Rank Parkway, right, sorry.
Okay, no, you're fine. I just want to make sure I'm with you here. So, thank you.
Do you have a copy of the evidence for me?
I do. I can give you this binder.
Okay. Did you give one to opposing counsel?
Yes.
Okay.
Figured that would be. I made 8 copies, so.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you.
Anything else?
Okay. Questions at this time?
So you mentioned the distinction of not reading the location of the sign in distance from another in a radial way.
Correct.
Where are you drawing that as a distinction to be made?
So if you go through your zoning code, there's many places in there that say a certain thing can't be within another certain distance from a school zone, for example, or a church zone or something like that. That's typically a radial. In this case, it says within 1,000 feet of both sides of the road. And prior to that, the zoning code was 500 feet on the single side of the road. So if you look at the progression of how the zoning code has changed, originally allowed it on one side, but because they're getting too crammed together, they said, look, let's do it on both sides. And understandably, you guys want to decrease the number of signs, I get it. But there is a distinction between both sides of the road and any other sign. And I think that if you were to take a look at all the signs in Kokomo, there'd be a lot of them within the violation, or in violation if you're doing it from a radial. Especially in this odd intersection, though, where you have 4 different roads intersecting in different ways. Sometimes you can read both of them from going different ways, but as the trees change and things change, that's why the code says both sides of the road and not within a radial.
Are you saying the way the sign faces is what fits?
Yes. So if you're driving down the road, and so say you're going east on, I think, 400.
Help me right here. Let's just go down South Washington Street.
Okay, so you're going down South Washington Street.
Going down South Washington, and
There's one sign on South Washington Street, and it's owned by another company that's not ours.
I'm approaching Smith Road.
You're approaching Smith Road.
And as I look out my windshield,
yep, you
to
will
my
see.
right-
You will see to your right. You're going south or north.
I'm going north.
You're going north. You will see a sign that is a V-shaped sign that is aiming towards Smith Road at the intersection. So if you look on, I think it's. If you pull Exhibit 5, so tab 5. So you were asking about driving south on Washington? Is that correct?
Yes.
So if you drive south on Washington, that's this one here, you'll see that there's the advertising sign there. As you come up to the intersection, you will see here, this is.
You're driving north on Washington.
This one's driving north.
Okay. If you come back 50 feet, I'm going to be able to see this sign, and one's on one side of Washington Street.
Right, and if
one's that's why I don't understand what you're
Right, yes, I'm not saying you can't see it directly. What I'm saying is if you look at how the signs are directed, yes, you can see it in your peripheral vision, but it is directing towards traffic on Smith Road. If you look on, I believe it's tab 6, you can see the outline of the signs, the V shape.
Right.
And so you can see that it's the faces of the sign are right here and right here. And so yes, you can sort of see it there, but it's designed for this flow of traffic right here. This sign here is designed for traffic here. So yes, can you see it? I'm not denying you can't see it if you're in the intersection. They're large billboards, but it's not facing, it doesn't read to that street.
Just back to the ordinances again, and the proximity and the radial proximity versus sort of line of sight. There's
Sure.
You're making an interpretive statement or an interpretive reading of the ordinance.
Yes,
It's
so
not stated explicitly.
Correct. It says on both sides of the road. So that would presume that the road the sign is on, not of any road.
I'm still confused. You got to help me.
Gotcha.
So you're saying that this one sign, it doesn't count on Washington because it's on Smith Road, even though when I'm going north on Washington, I can see 2 signs.
So you're talking about the sign that's not Burkhart's?
I have no idea whose
Yeah.
sign's whose. I'm
So
just telling you, I drove out there. like-
There's a monument sign on Washington.
Correct.
That we have not seen the permit for. I don't know when that sign was put there. That sign, you can see it on one angle. If you're at the very intersection, you can see it. Conversely, the Smith Road sign, you can see it for a mile in either direction going east and west. You can see the Apperson Way sign, again, a mile going north and south. You can't see the Washington sign from the Apperson Way sign unless you're right in the middle of the intersection. It's a very odd intersection there, and so I think that's part of the confusion. But these signs have, again, been here for decades. There's been no issues. They were permitted by the city of Howard County at first, which I believe is the north sign there, which had a different zoning ordinance at the time, allowing it to be on the same side of the road. It's on Smith Road. It's not on Washington. So it wouldn't have been approved for the permit at the time if it was in violation.
I need a clarification on non-conforming. Can I make a statement and you tell me where I'm? Normally, if something's non-conforming and then a change comes to that, to whatever it is in the ordinance, you were legally non-conforming, but you made a change, and when you make the change, don't you have to step up to the present ordinance?
Yes. Yes. And these are things, as I said at the beginning when I made a motion, you guys are not voting tonight. You're simply taking in all the evidence and the argument that he's making. We will hold an executive session where you can ask me these kinds of legal questions. I'm not a voting member, I can simply provide these kinds
But
of
it's okay
answers
if I
to you.
get, if I get clarification of where he's coming from.
Yeah, you can ask him as many questions as you want. Know that he is not presenting you with testimony right now. He is, as the attorney, he's merely giving you argument.
Okay.
His client provided you with testimony.
While his client was reading his statement, I made numerous notes on that statement. So should I wait until we have the executive meeting to ask you the legal part of those or what they're saying or not?
That's hard for me to answer because it depends on, if you're asking me the legal veracity of things that he said, then yes, that would it would be more appropriate in the executive session.
Okay.
But if you want clarification on
No.
his testimony, then so I can't do that. You would have to ask him.
Okay, no, I'm good, thank you.
Any other questions at this time?
Yeah, I've got a question on the 400 East Smith Road sign. You say it's a V-shaped sign. Why? Why isn't it just a straight sign?
I am not in the billboard business. I don't know why one sign is another. I believe these signs, again, were purchased by, from another individual. Burkhart, I think, has had them for maybe 20 years. They haven't changed. I don't think that the reason why they haven't been changed into anything else is because, going back to Mr. Bessinger, his comment that it would become then non-conforming.
Yeah.
And since there are no signs allowed in the city of Kokomo, we'd have to take it down. No off-premise, no off-premise signs.
Can you talk to me a little bit more about your measurement of the 408 Washington sign, the height?
Yep, sure. So if you, I think that is 3. So I did not do this. We had a Rusty Logan, who's a certified land surveyor, came out on August 4th. He measured the sign from the base to the top, and that was 46.31 feet. So the ground, from the ground to the top of the sign at its base. Now, if you measured from, and this is possibly where there's confusion, if you measured from the center of the roadway, that's 48 feet. But as you guys know, roadways change over time. depending on how many times it's been paved. It's been up there for 30 years, so I don't know if the crown has changed or not. But the signs, I believe, are measured from the top to the bottom, just like the permit shows a measurement from the top of the sign to the bottom of the sign, and that is 46.31 feet.
I do have one other question, just to make sure that I understand the arguments that you raised. It sounded like in the middle of everything that you said, you almost raised an oral motion to dismiss. Did you, in fact, was that your intent when you talked about how we shouldn't be in front of the BZA because of 10.7A and 10.7B? Or is that just an additional argument that you're raising about that these notice violations should?
Well, I definitely have. I do not believe we should be presenting in front of you guys. I think this should be in the circuit court or superior court as the code says, and we'd be litigating this in front of a jury. If you would like me to make a motion to dismiss this to be presented to the city county or the county courts.
No, I just wanted to make
perfectly
sure that you didn't have, I'm trying to think clearly of how the findings of fact should be drafted ultimately, and whether or not I need to address a jurisdictional issue up front before I get to
Yes.
the merit of the case.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You kind of stuck it in the middle, and I want to make sure that
Yes.
I do it.
So just to be
procedurally
clear,
correct.
I don't think we should be here because I don't think you guys agreed to not have civil zoning violations filed against us in the MOU, and I believe there's civil zoning violations which should be heard in the circuit and superior court. That being said, I presented you with all of our evidence to go and show, even if that was the case, we still don't think that the violations are correct.
Do you have an exhibit or any documentation pointing to that, the 10.7A or 10.7?
Yeah, so I did, I included the zoning code for your reference. Obviously, you guys are the Board of Zoning Appeals, you have your code. But I accidentally did not include 10.7. It somehow did not print in the binder. But I do have a copy of it, one copy if you guys would like to see it. It's pretty clear that says types of zoning violations, and then lists out these are deemed civil, shall be deemed civil zoning violations, and then lists 10.7A and 10.7B.
I can bring those to the executive session. You can see the ordinances, and it would be in your book. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Is this a case where we ask anyone in the audience supposed to be heard? Or
Yeah,
not?
it's a public hearing, but I would do that at the end. This is the middle of the case.
Okay.
The city's representative should get an
Presents
opportunity to
that
speak.
case. Okay. Anyone else have questions at this time? Okay. So the next step then is to call forward
Yep.
the staff findings, basically, right? Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
My name is Brad Dick, and I'm representing the staff and the city in this matter, and represented the city in a number of different, or previously in zoning matters. And so I'm going to go through the staff findings and that show that Director Sheline properly cited the Burkhart signs. And we've heard a lot of testimony about matters that I would say are sort of ancillary to the task of a Board of Zoning Appeals, because this case is rather simple. It's about whether Burkhart's signs comply with Kokomo's zoning ordinance. And as will be shown, they do not. And there are 4 signs at issue. First is Rank Parkway, and the problem there is pretty simple. It's too close to other signs, it's too close to the right-of-way, and it is not a legally non-conforming sign. And actually, we've heard some testimony today that admissions that I believe would confirm that it is not a lawfully non-conforming sign. Second There's the issue of the signs that are at the intersection. You've got Washington, Smith, and Apperson. The signs are too close together, and as will be seen, some of the questions that have been asked, I think are going to be resolved, that these signs are clearly too close to one another under the zoning ordinance and therefore are not in conformity with it. Finally, there is the sign on Washington Street that we've heard some discussion of, and its height. And this sign was not built in conformity with the improvement location permit that was issued for that sign, and therefore it must be removed. And I'll also address at the end, there's been discussion of a memorandum of understanding, the procedure, and various other arguments outside of whether these signs comply with the ordinances, and I will address those last. Now we'll see if this works. It does. So this is the first sign. This is a picture of the sign at 1619 Rank Parkway as it currently exists today. And Kokomo zoning ordinance 6.41DC states that there must be a minimum separation between any two off-premise signs on both sides of all streets or highways shall be 1,000 feet. And the ordinance also provides that the sign must be no closer than 25 feet to any existing or proposed right-of-way. And at this point, I'll ask Director Sheline to explain to the board why did you cite this sign, Director Sheline?
Well, two reasons for this sign. Number one, it is clearly too close to other billboards. And number two, I believe the right-of-way should be 25 feet, and I believe it's 20 feet.
And when you measured the signs, did you find, and in your notice of violations, did you find that this sign is 300 feet from a billboard located at 1800 East Havens Court?
Approximately, yes.
And did you find that this billboard is also 760 feet from the billboard located at 860 Daniel Drive?
Yes.
And did you also find that this sign is 490 feet from the billboard located at 1619 East North Street?
Approximately, yes.
And is that, the last one I just mentioned, 1619 East North Street, is that on the same side of the street as this sign?
Yes.
And I believe Burkhart's admitted, I don't think this fact is in dispute at all. You've also found that this sign is 20 feet from the right-of-way, correct?
Correct.
But the zoning ordinance requires that it must be 25 feet.
Correct.
And these are the reasons that you cited in your notice of violations.
Yes.
And those are still the reasons that these signs do not comply, correct?
Correct.
In the Burkhart's appeal, they raised an argument that this sign was a lawful non-conforming use, or that was what their argument was as to why it did not need to comply with the zoning ordinance. And the staff findings, the staff addressed that argument. And at the beginning of the presentation, there was something about new violations or something like to that effect, that there were unnoticed violations. He didn't specify what he was referring to, but the staff is certainly able to respond to an issue that is raised in the appeal when they file the appeal and say, we don't comply with the zoning ordinance, but we're a lawful non-conforming use. And in the staff findings, the staff then responded to that argument that Burkhart made in its appeal. And as you can see, in 1999, there was a permit application for a sign at this location. And as you can see, the drawing of it, it is different than the sign that currently exists. It's a 48 by 12, and then it has a smaller sign. And I'll ask for the testimony of Mr. Kindred on this point. Or do you want to come forward or make sure that we can hear you on the microphone?
We'll ask that you state your name and address for the record.
Steve Kinder, 3403 Weathered Rock Circle, Kokomo. Yes, the billboard that as drawn was the original billboard that was put up there in 1999. So,
can you just, and also for the record, so that somebody, if they're ever reading this, what is your current position?
I'm the code enforcement officer for the Plan Commission.
And before you started working for the city, what was your job?
I was the owner of Kinder Sign Service with a family business for almost 50 years, located here in Kokomo.
So you were familiar with signs in the area?
Right, correct. Mm-hmm.
And do you recall that this sign, that this was what the permit was issued for? Was this sign constructed?
Yes, it was.
So this sign existed at the location?
At one time, yes.
I'll have a little bit. And this is a picture from 2005 at this same location. And as you can see, we now have a double stack billboard with 2 catwalks, 8 lights, and it's a much taller sign, and I'll ask for your testimony on this again, since you have firsthand knowledge of this. Are you familiar with this sign?
Yes. I actually have photographs of that sign from the Fouts Tire place next door. So we actually have proof that it was built like that at that time.
And are you aware, and this is the point where I did not hear any testimony today from Burkhart, that an improvement location permit was ever issued by the city of Kokomo for this sign that we see in this picture here that you also saw in person?
No, we've never been able to locate any kind of a change of order or whatever for a new permit for that sign, as opposed to the one that was done in 1999.
And the Kokomo zoning ordinance requires an
Yes.
improvement location permit. You can't just tear your sign down and build this sign. You need to come to the city of Kokomo and get permission to do that?
Correct.
And if you don't get that permission, is it a lawful non-conforming sign?
No, I'd say it's an illegal sign. If you have no permit at all, it's illegal. So that's my opinion.
And would you also say that this sign, as it was constructed, was larger than the original actually permitted sign?
Yes, much larger.
Thank you. And so I think this is another fact that it does not appear to be in dispute, and that is that this sign that existed in 2005 was never permitted, and therefore it was never a lawful non-conforming use. And we've heard some testimony today about that when Burkhart acquired the sign, but the fact is the sign is not a lawful non-conforming use. And so whether there was some transfer of this sign at some point, which I don't believe there's any evidence of when that transfer occurred, would not change the fact that this is not a lawful non-conforming sign because it was never permitted, and therefore it is not allowed or was not allowed under Kokomo's zoning ordinance. And this is a picture from Google Earth that confirms that this sign, or from Google Street View, this is from 2007, that sign was then removed, and that's consistent with the testimony you've heard today from Burkhart, that this sign was then taken down. So the 2005 sign that was never permitted was taken down, and this is in September of 2007. And this is also consistent with, in the staff findings, Exhibit 1 was the permit that Burkhart submitted when it got the permit in 2008 to construct its billboard. It included invoices that showed that it was building new sign faces when it was constructing this sign in 2008. And so that's the sign that we see here and that you see to this day, is the sign that Burkhart applied for in 2008. It constructed a different sign than the one that had previously existed, the one that had not been permitted, and constructed this sign. And as you can see, and I'll ask Steve to come back up for just a little bit more, since he has seen both of these signs in person.
Sure.
Can you describe to the BCA the differences between these boards? Because the 2005 picture, hopefully it came through clearer on your printouts that you have in your staff findings. But the picture from 2005 is not a digital photo, and so it's a little bit unclear. So if you could explain for the record and for the BCA how these signs differ.
Well, the main difference is the 2005 sign had 8 lights, 2 catwalks, 1 for each board. They're about the same size. It was also approximately 50 foot tall. And then in 2008, they dropped it down to just 4 lights, all illuminated from the bottom, 1 catwalk, and lowered the sign to about 39 foot 6 inches. So, which as it stands today. So there was major renovation.
And that leads into the Kokomo Zoning Ordinance 8.6a, and this has been cited in the staff findings, provides that major changes include changing the height, adding lights, altering lighting, and/or relocation. And the ordinance goes on to provide that legal non-conforming signs which are structurally altered by a major change, relocated, or replaced shall comply immediately with all provisions of this zoning ordinance. And there's 2 keys to this. First of all, it says it only applies to a legal non-conforming sign. As we've discussed, this 2005 sign was never permitted and so was not a legal non-conforming sign. Therefore, this major change provision about non-conforming signs does not even apply because this sign was never a legal non-conforming sign. The second issue is that if you even had a legal non-conforming sign, if you performed a major change to that sign, then you have to immediately bring it into compliance with the zoning ordinance. In this case, the change from the 2005 sign to the 2008 sign was a major change because, as Steve testified, it altered the lighting, it altered the structure, it altered the height of the billboard, and so that qualifies as a major change. So even if this sign had been a legal non-conforming sign in 2005, which it was not, that change to this current sign would have required it to come into compliance with Kokomo's zoning ordinance. And as Director Sheline testified earlier, this sign is not, the 2008 billboard is not in conformance with Kokomo's zoning ordinance because it is too close to other billboards and it is too close to the right-of-way. As a result, the BZA should affirm Mr. Director Sheline's finding that this sign was not and is not in conformance with Kokomo's zoning ordinance, and the sign should be removed. So that's the first sign that's at issue. The next signs that are at issue are at the corner. And there were a number of questions about this, and so hopefully we've got some pictures that can help clear this up. But the Kokomo zoning ordinance, in effect in 2001, provided that a minimum separation between off-premise signs on both sides of the street or highway shall be 1,000 feet. In 2001, Burkhart applied for two different signs. They applied for Burkhart 1 and what I've called Burkhart 1, and that's been identified in the staff findings just to differentiate between these two signs. The Burkhart 1 sign is on the north side of Smith Road and on the west side of Apperson, and the Burkhart Billboard 2 is on the south side of Smith Road and the west side of Apperson. And there was also a sign that pre-existed both of these other signs on Washington. Now, Director Sheline, in the application for these permits, or for these signs, do you recall what addresses were listed and whether those are actual street addresses?
I think, if I remember correctly, one of them was, but one was an address that we could not come up with.
And and one was one of the applications for 3005 North Apperson, and then the other was for 400 East Smith Road.
Correct.
And the 400 East Smith Road is not an actual street address for that piece of property, correct?
Did not find it, correct.
So if the application had the actual street addresses for these properties, would it have been apparent that the signs are extremely close together? If they had said one's at 3005 Apperson, the other is at 3100 Apperson, that would have raised that red flag for the...
Yes.
And do you recall from measurements how far Burkhart Billboard 1 is from this pre-existing billboard that's over here on Washington when you measured those?
I think that one was 400 and some feet, if I remember correctly.
I think your citation, I believe, in the notice of violation.
245.
That sounds.
245, sorry.
No problem. So that's this billboard over here. Burkhart Billboard 1 is 245 feet from there.
Approximately, yes.
And how far is Burkhart Billboard 1 from Burkhart Billboard 2?
234, if I remember correctly, 235.
And do you know how far the pre-existing billboard is from Burkhart Billboard 2?
I think that was around 460, 470, if I remember correctly.
So each of these billboards is within 1,000 feet of the other billboards,
Yes,
correct?
Absolutely.
And we've heard some argument today about whether these billboards are visible, that there isn't a billboard on the north side of Smith Road and on the south side. And if you look, this is a picture from Smith Road. And what you'll see here is you've got Burkhart Billboard 2 on the south side and Burkhart Billboard 1 on the north side of the street. And both of them are visible. If it wasn't far away, you can read the billboards if you're sitting there in person. And Director Sheline, is it your interpretation of the Kokomo zoning ordinance that these two signs are within 1,000 feet of each other on either side of Smith Road?
Yes,
And so that's a violation of the zoning ordinance in your interpretation?
in my interpretation, yes.
If we go forward, this is a picture there was a question about what if you're driving north on Washington Street, and let me go. And that's the pre-existing billboard. So if you're at this intersection, you've got the pre-existing billboard on the left and Burkhart billboard number 1 on the right. And Director Sheline, is it your interpretation of the Kokomo zoning ordinance and that you can see both of these billboards from Washington Street and they are within 1,000 feet of each other?
Correct.
And so these would also not be in compliance.
Right.
So it's your interpretation of the zoning ordinance that Burkhart Billboard 1 and Burkhart Billboard 2 are too close to other signs and are not in conformity with the zoning ordinance?
That's correct.
And so that's really as simple as this is that these signs are too close together. They're not supposed to be more than within 1,000 feet of each other, and they are. And they were built in, they used different addresses when they were applied for, and they are not in conformity with the zoning ordinance. And that is why the staff would urge the BZA to conclude that Director Sheline properly determined that these billboards do not comply with the zoning ordinance and that they should be removed. The last one is 408 South Washington Street. And Director Sheline, can you explain to the BZA why you cited this billboard?
Yeah, it's about 2 foot taller than what the permit actually allowed. The permit was 47 feet, and it was around 48.9, if I remember correctly.
And are you required to construct a sign? Or a sign or building, if you get an improvement location permit, do you have to build that structure in conformity with your application?
Correct.
And so would it be your conclusion based on your measurements that this sign was not constructed in conformity with its improvement location permit?
That's correct.
And so it's a violation of the zoning ordinance?
That's correct.
And therefore, that sign, once again, this is a very simple case, that it was not constructed within the requirements of its improvement location permit, and it should be removed. And we would urge the BZA to find that Director Sheline properly found that this sign was not constructed in conformity with its improvement location permit. Now, we've heard some arguments today, and about a memorandum of understanding. There's testimony about a settlement which has not been introduced to the BZA, and then also a memorandum of understanding. And so what I'll I'll ask if you're familiar with this email that I've presented the BZA.
Yes.
And can you describe to the BZA what this email is?
Yeah, basically, we did talk about a settlement agreement. This was where Lawrence McCormick was the counsel for the city of Kokomo. And in this email, he was asking that we keep the settlement agreement, that it should be a separate matter from the billboards that were damaged in the tornado at that time.
And who is Gavin Fairlick?
Gavin Fairlick, I believe, he was vice president of, corporate affairs for Burkhart Advertising. I think that was his title. I could be wrong on the exact title,
But so he works at Burkhart?
He did. He does not now, my understanding.
And can you describe what the settlement agreement was?
The settlement agreement, if I remember correctly, was for we would allow some billboards to stay up and to be repaired, and then others would come down. That's basically what the settlement agreement was for.
And does Mr. McCormick state that we prefer keeping the legislation out of the settlement agreement as it is a matter separate that will affect all billboard providers in Kokomo? And can you explain to the BZA what he's saying there, or what you understood that to mean?
Well, that it would not, that the cap and replace, and this settlement agreement would not be conducive to that, that we would keep it separate, it would be a separate item. And then, and there again, it's not just for, it was never just intended for Burkhart. These were, we talked to other billboard companies that were in Kokomo at the time. So this was never intended directly just at Burkhart Advertising.
And if you could turn, do you have the binder that was provided by Burkhart?
I did not get one.
You did not get one? Okay. Did other BCA members have this binder? Because there's, look at tab 1. There's a memorandum of understanding on the first page of Exhibit 1. And then on the second page, if you turn, there's a list of billboards. But, and make sure I understand this correctly as well, the list of billboards covered by the settlement agreement, is that what Mr. McCormick is saying is separate from?
That's my understanding, yes.
That list, and that list, it doesn't include any of the billboards that are at issue today, does it?
No.
So the agreement that the city had that takes some down, keeps some up, that doesn't involve any of the billboards at issue today. And so that list, do you understand that list that's page 2 is not related to the first page of this exhibit?
Correct.
Thank you.
If you could take a second to look through this while I'm passing it out for Sheila. Do you recognize what this is?
Yes.
Can you describe to the BZA and for the record what this is?
Yes, I believe it's the settlement agreement that we talked about after the tornado went through in 2013.
And are you aware whether the memorandum of understanding or cap and replace is in this settlement agreement?
Not to my knowledge, it wasn't.
So that would be consistent with Mr. McCormick's email that the cap and replace legislation would not be related to this settlement agreement. And I would also say this is more just for a legal matter, that there's a severability clause in this agreement that says that it contains this entire agreement. But that would be consistent with his email that you received.
Correct.
Pass out a copy of the Can you describe what this is, Mr. Sheline?
Yes, this is the MOU that we talked about with the outdoor advertising companies. And this is where we talked about presenting language to take before the city council.
And this is the same as the version that's in the, just for the, this is the same. I believe it's in tab 1. I just don't have a copy of it any longer, so I made sure everybody has a copy. The documents are the same, to the best of my, what I can tell. I'll ask you some questions about this memorandum of understanding. If you could just describe generally what this was about. What is this cap and replace legislation?
Well, I think Mr. Herman did a pretty good job of explaining what that is. Cap and replace, to my knowledge, is basically a situation where the city can work with billboard companies to get credits to take certain billboards down, and in return, the billboard companies get to put up other billboards, and I'm assuming an area that they would prefer to have a new billboard. And that's what we originally talked about. obviously, their thoughts and my thoughts on how many billboards we would take down differ quite a bit. I don't know how far you want me to get.
Okay, I'll ask you a few questions
Okay.
about it here in a second. But first off, as a legal matter, this would be more for Ms. Copeland, is that this is a memorandum of understanding. It's essentially an agreement to an agree. I mean, you can read it from the face of it. In Indiana, that would not be an enforceable contract. That is, if you agree, like, let's work together to try to get some legislation done, that would not be an enforceable contract. So I would say, first off, the argument that this somehow precludes Kokomo from enforcing its zoning ordinance forever is simply not supported as a matter of Indiana law. And as a second, Kokomo didn't violate this memorandum of understanding or an agreement to go out and try to draft some legislation. And that on that front, Director Sheeline, I'd ask you some questions. The first item there, it says, by July 31st, 2014, Kokomo will meet with outdoor advertising companies to complete a draft of ordinance amendments regarding off-premise signage. Was any draft language completed by July 31st, 2014?
There were meetings up until then, but as far as language being specifically drafted, no, I don't believe it was.
Then the second item is, by August 31st, 2014, Kokomo will fully endorse this legislation and present it to the Kokomo Plan Commission for approval once an agreed draft is finalized. Did that step occur?
That did not happen.
The next step is, by September 30th, 2014, Kokomo will fully endorse this legislation and present it to the Kokomo City Council for initial consideration. Are you aware, did that step occur?
Did not.
Then finally, it says, by October 20th, 2014, Kokomo will publicly endorse this legislation during its second and third reading before the Kokomo City Council. Did that occur?
Did not.
Are you familiar with this document, Mr. Sheeline?
Yes.
And can you generally describe what it is?
Yeah, this is from Mr. Furlick from Burkhart Outdoor Advertising, stating that that was an email to Beth, our counsel, myself, and Patsy Leali, who used to work in my office, that he had been in Kokomo for a triathlon, and he basically admitted that he was long overdue in sending comments to the recent version of the Rose Cat Place, which we had sent to him.
Can you, the date on this is in September of 2015?
Correct.
And the dates we were looking at in the memorandum of understanding, those dates were all in 2014, correct? So we're long after the schedule that was contemplated in this memorandum of understanding. And that leads to a difference as to what this memorandum of there's been a number of times, and I think it's quoted in some of the documents that have been provided to you, that it says Kokomo will not cite any Burkhart billboards for non-compliance. Critically, there are words that come before that statement. It says, during the process listed above. Those are key terms here. During the process listed above, Kokomo will not cite any Burkhart billboards for non-compliance. And as we just saw, that process that was listed up there, that expected schedule, the last item in it occurred in October of 2014. And so, Director Sheeline, did Kokomo cite Burkhart during the process that was listed above for any violations?
No.
These are 2014 dates. Did that occur in 2017 that they were cited?
Correct.
So years after this. And another key phrase that I do not believe has been quoted is the end of the sentence. It says, as long as both parties are working in good faith effort to pursue legislation. Did Kokomo try to pursue legislation? Let me ask. Did it work out?
No.
It didn't work out? Was Kokomo still pursuing that legislation in 2017 when it cited Burkhart signs? Or at the time it cited them?
I can't remember the exact dates. I know the last email that Mr. Furlick and I had back and forth to each other, that he had sent me an email to come up with some areas of town that we would prefer the billboards to be taken out of, whether it be downtown, 931, whatever. We completed that. We sent that back to Mr. Furlick. And then I never heard any more from him. And then I believe when we were in the meeting that was talked about, Mr. Herman told me then that Mr. Furlick no longer worked for the company and hadn't for several months. So we felt like that we did what we needed to do. We sent our last response back to Mr. Furlick, to the best of my knowledge, and then we never got another response from him.
And so I would submit to the BZA that 2 points on the memorandum of understanding. First, it's an agreement to an agreement to we're going to pursue legislation and try to do it. Second of all, so it would not preclude Kokomo from enforcing its zoning ordinance forever, and that Burkhart signs can always remain up, because there were a lot of hurdles that had to be jumped in order for this to ever come to fruition. First of all, Burkhart and Kokomo had to agree on legislation. Then the memorandum of understanding says that other unspecified companies are going to have to also agree to this legislation. Then it's going to have to be approved by the Plan Commission. Then it's going to have to be approved by the City Council. And so there were a lot of different steps involved in this that had to occur before there would ever be legislation. And so this, I would say, as a matter of law, is just an agreement to agree that does not preclude Kokomo from enforcing its zoning ordinance. And the second point would be that Kokomo participated, complied with this in good faith, but the memorandum of understanding under its own terms only applies during the process listed above, and when the citations were issued in this case, it was long after the process listed above. We've heard some arguments as well about the procedure that has been followed in this case, and whether, as a matter of law, this board is even the proper board to hear this appeal. Under Indiana law, appeals from decisions from the planning director or other administrators of a zoning ordinance go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that's in 3674-918.1. Similarly, Kokomo's zoning ordinance provides that review and hear of appeals of decisions made under this zoning ordinance by the planning director and plan commission staff are to the BZA. Kokomo zoning ordinance 10.2 tasks the planning director with investigating zoning violations and provides that the degree of action will be at the discretion of the investigating person. That is, Director Sheline, when he investigates a violation, has the discretion to choose which tool that's available to him he wants to use in a particular instance. Does he want to take it to the BZA? Does he want to sue the person in court and seek an injunction, which happens frequently? And Kokomo follows that sometimes. Sometimes an injunction is a better method to use. Sometimes you can issue a notice of violation, but it is Director Sheline's discretion to choose which tool he wants to use in any given situation. And you do see in your binder there, they provided 10.8, and that's, I believe, the last tab in the binder, which is the notice of violation procedure for a violation. And that is the procedure that was followed in this case, where there was a violation and the notice was provided of the violation, and then after the notice of violation under zoning ordinance 1010 provides that any person receiving notice of violation may appeal the violation to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And that was the procedure that was followed in this case, with a notice of violation followed by an appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And that is a procedure that Indiana law specifically provides for, and cities and towns across this state follow every single day. Now, Burkhart has argued that, and if you go a little bit further in there, you'll see 1012 in your section 1012 in the, I believe it's in the binder you're looking at there. Or do you have 1012 in your binder?
Our binders.
The binder Burkhart provided you. I think it's in, given my binder to Director Sheila. It's Exhibit 7, tab 7. If you look at, it's about the third page back. They're looking at section 10.1.2. But you'll see at the top there, the title of it is Alternate Violation Procedures. Alternate. It is an alternative method that can be used for enforcing a zoning violation. Director Sheline, are you guys finding that? Is that in your binders?
Yes.
Okay. Looks like maybe there was some confusion. I just wanted to make sure everybody
He
had
doesn't have tabs.
I don't have tabs.
Oh, I have tabs. Well, that explains why it's hard to find.
Exhibit 7.
Perfect. Do you all have is there a copy of the zoning ordinance, or is that something they have or no?
We all have our zoning ordinances.
Okay. So that's clearly labeled, 10.1.2 is clearly labeled an alternate zoning, a procedure for violations of zoning. Burkhart's argument is that what is clearly labeled an alternate is mandatory in this case. And if you look in your binders with your zoning ordinances, and I don't know if you have them, if not, then I can, but it's section 10.7 defines types of violations. And so the types of violations under 10.7 are placement of a structure, not in conformance with the zoning ordinance, erection of a structure, not in conformance with the zoning ordinance, failure to obtain an improvement location permit, conducting a use that does not comply with the provisions or explicit intent of the zoning ordinance, any failure to comply with and or any regulations of the zoning ordinance, proceeding with work under a stop work order, failure to obtain a certificate of occupancy. So the violations in 10.7 are essentially any violation you can conceive of under the zoning ordinance. Burkhart's argument is that any violation that's listed in 10.7 has to go to court every single time under that alternate procedure 10.1.2 that we were looking at. Nothing in the ordinance provides that. The ordinance clearly says that that is an alternate procedure, and therefore, the argument that every single zoning violation has to go to court is simply not supported by the zoning ordinance. And so this is more of a legal matter, but would say that that is not a valid argument that this case had to go to court rather than through the BZA, which is the normal procedure. And Director Sheline, is this the procedure that you've typically followed? The last issue we've had has been about whether fines were properly issued in this case, and that under section 10.8, a notice of violation can be provided, which is what Director Sheline did. That a violation must be corrected within 15 days of the postmark, or you can receive a fine. The fine can be anywhere from $50 to $2,500, with each day constituting a separate violation. On April 12th, Director Sheline sent out notices of violation that have been included in the staff report or the staff findings, stating that Burkhart had 15 days to correct the violations. The notices provided that fines will be issued if that was not complied with. Burkhart did not bring the signs into compliance, and on May 5th, 2017, Director Sheline sent the notices of violation. This is exactly what is contemplated by Kokomo's zoning ordinance, and it was the procedure that was followed in this case. And so there's been some discussion of the fines. I would say in this case, you've had a company operating for-profit billboards for many years that were not built in compliance with Kokomo's zoning ordinance. And so if a business chooses not to follow the rules, then I think it's well within it's contemplated by Kokomo's zoning ordinances and is also fair if somebody doesn't play by the rules, that the fines that are provided for by your ordinance can be applied as Director Sheline did. And so the procedure that was followed in this case is exactly what is contemplated by the zoning ordinance. And as a final aside, there was an opening statement about questions being presented, and I don't know if Mr. Deputy was referring to me or to somebody else, but I would say that the statement I had about questions was that the Board of Zoning Appeal, your board's procedures provide the process for these appeals, and that was my statement, was that the process is provided for in your Board of Zoning Appeal rules, and so that's, I think, the process that would be my position, but that's simply my position, and I don't know if he was referring to me, but my position is the BZA rules say what they say, and that for the procedure, and that's what should be complied with in this case. And so, as in regard to questions, had not said that they couldn't ask questions, but that the Board of Zoning Appeals rules deal with that, and that's not my area to pass judgment on the Board of Zoning Appeals rules or how you interpret your rules. And so in conclusion, I would say it's a pretty simple case. For Rank Parkway, the billboard is too close to the road, too close to the right-of-way, too close to other billboards, and it is not a lawful non-conforming use. As to the Apperson Road, Smith, Washington Street area, that intersection, those billboards that Burkhart applied for, they are too close to each other, and they are too close to the existing sign, and I think that Director Sheline was well within his authority as planning director to interpret Kokomo's zoning ordinance to conclude that those signs are not in conformity with it. And finally, the 408 South Washington billboard was not constructed in compliance with its improvement location permit. And I can take any questions that anyone has.
Can you read the citation for the Indiana Code?
Yes.
3674.
3674918.1, and it provides a Board of Zoning Appeals shall hear and determine appeals from and review. Then there's a few others, but it then goes on to say any order, requirement, or determination by an administrative official, which Director Sheline would be an administrative official, and the appeal from his decision to issue these citations properly came to the BZA under Indiana law.
Anybody?
Questions at this point?
Can I make a clarifying point on one piece of evidence that he presented?
Yeah.
You'll get an opportunity to do like rebuttal, reply. Do you want to do that then, or do you want to do it now?
I have just one reply I think that is germane, and it's dealing with the MOU and the email that's on tab 1. In there,
If you're going to do it now, then you have to come forward.
if you take a look at tab 1 and then turn to the second page, you'll see it's an email from Gavin Furlick, or to Gavin Furlick from Lawrence McCormick, with an attachment that's listed under there as Burkhart billboards permit issues. Mr. Dick had referenced that the billboards in question today were not included in this email. However, if you look at the attachment, which is the last page of tab 1, you'll see the last 2 pages of tab 1. You'll see Burkhart billboards with permit issues. The first sign location is 400 East Smith Road, and then if you go down about halfway through, 1619 Rank Parkway is listed. These signs were clearly contemplated at the time the MOU was entered. These signs that are noticed here, and also which Mr. Sheline has prepared several other zoning violations on back in July of this year, those are all here, and they were contemplated in the MOU. So that was my only clarifying point on that.
Could I offer an explanation of the response to that, or?
Sure.
The email that he's referring to is dated March 7, 2014. The email that I've given to you from Mr. McCormick, the city's attorney, is May 22nd, 2014. And this is where he says, we want to keep the memorandum of understanding that's about cap and replace separate from the settlement agreement. So this email comes after this email. And then you now have the settlement agreement before you, as you will see, the settlement agreement does, my statement, or my intent of my statement was that the settlement agreement did not cover the billboards that are at issue in this case, and the settlement agreement comes after both of these emails. If that makes sense. Or does that make sense, or are there any questions? Thank you for your time.
And one other point, since he was bringing it up, he also made a comment that Burkhart had not reached out regarding Captain Place. If you look on tab 2, and bear with me, it's fairly long, you'll see some emails regarding other companies that were looking at it up into 2016, and then as late as February and May of 2016, Mr. Herman is talking with Mr. McKay about the Captain Place ordinance. In 2017, Dave Herman again followed up and asked about the Captain Place ordinance, I believe on January 16th of 2017. So, and you can see that as the first email in Exhibit 2.
Does anybody have any questions on what they've heard? We have a lot to process.
Indeed.
That's the public.
All right, is there anyone in the audience who'd like to be heard regarding this case? If you'll state, or come to the microphone and state your name and address, and then...
I'm on the Apperson.
Okay, if you'll come and tell us your name and your address.
My name is Ted Tate. I own the property at Apperson and Smith Road. And I'm here to point out a few things on that.
Mr. Tate, what's your address?
6350 West, 90 South, Kokomo.
Okay, and what corner of that intersection do you own?
What?
Which corner do you own?
I own the northeast corner between Apperson and Washington.
Okay.
That whole area.
Okay. Okay, and go ahead then.
But that's a very unique place because the Nickel Road runs right beside it. And the sign is right by my building and right by the intersection of Smith Road and Washington Street. That's where the Nickel Trail passes, go across. There's no signs there, there's no lights there. And Burkhart always has a light on. And this is a very high crime area and a very high traffic area. I had to replace 100 windows in my building right there because they were shot out. And that, of course, that Smith Road is a heavy traffic because of Chrysler on the other end across 31. So the lights at that billboard creates a safe area, and to my notion, and because it does furnish the lights, and I don't see any reason. Let me pass this out.
Watch that step up, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can just go ahead and pass them down if you'd like.
Okay.
There you go. There you go. Here you go.
The pink area is where the sign is.
Can you?
I'm sorry. I'd like to suggest that the council get microphones because I can't hear. And I was here for a whole meeting, me and my son, 5 months ago we sat through the whole meeting and our case is canceled. We didn't hear it. And so anyway, the pink area is a sign and the yellow area is a crossing of Smith Road and the trail. And that's there's no street light there, and there's always lights. It's a high crime area and high traffic area, and it's protection. I have lights on my building, but there's no street lights there, and I'd like to see the city leave the lights there for their own benefit. Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to be heard regarding this case? Either side have anything else for us to consider? Okay, our motion this evening is just to kind of hear what's going on and move at some point towards an executive meeting, correct?
Yes. The matter will be taken under advisement.
When there will be a written statement or findings from these days?
No, according to our rules, we have 70 days from the day they vote. It's a matter of talking with them about their availability for an executive session.
Right, so just to get it clear, it's 70 days from when you guys have your executive session, from when you vote, but you don't.
Well, there will be no voting at the executive session. They have to vote publicly.
Okay.
So at the earliest, they would vote at their next meeting, but that would be the absolute earliest if we can get together in the next 30 days.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay, any questions from anyone else, especially for council? So how do we wrap up the discussion on this? Is that wrap up?
We're wrapped.
Okay. So our next item on the agenda is other business.
I have no other business tonight, Mr. President.
Anything from you?
No.
Anyone on the board? Hearing no other business, do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make the motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed to that? All right, thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you.